Welcome back to the channel. Again, apologies for the delay in getting some of these videos out. It's been a very hectic past few months. Getting sick, having family come into town, all sorts of things. So, if you remember from the Walker Bulldog videos, you can tell this is much further along than the last update you've seen. Don't worry, it's all filmed and just I need to edit it. But if you remember from that, we were waiting on paint to show up. And it took a little while for me to get the paint in, but that's because I ordered a lot of paint. But the paint finally came in, and what I wanted to do today is some testing for the paint. One of the things I don't like to do with any new paint is just put on a model I'm actually working on, and because if anything goes wrong, we're kind of messed up and you can't do anything. Especially with something like this where we've already done the exhaust and we've added surface texture with the Stynol Res primer, because if something happens and I need to strip this, when I strip it, all that surface texture and everything else will come off and I don't want to have to redo any of it. So instead of just spraying this, and you can see where priming had revealed some things I needed to sand, but instead of spraying this, we are going to get our paint mule, which is, to me, is Char 1 or B1, whatever the kit is. Yeah, the B1 BIS or BIS, and you can tell it's kind of dusty. I've already dusted it and sprayed it. That's just the dust that's sort of gotten into the surface, which isn't really a problem, but for dusting I just used canned air and blow it off. We're going to do everything on this and pretty much go through all the things we're going to do on the Bulldog on this in terms of weathering, decals, everything, to see how the paint's going to react. I prefer to do something on an actual model than to put it on sheet stock or something like that, because I want a good, as I spit all over this, a good representation of what it's going to be like on an actual model. And so what's what we're going to use. Here we have the paint. As you can tell, it is a large paint order. I don't remember how many bottles I ordered, and I'm not going to count. But we have the OD, and this is the Scale Colors acrylic paint. This is their SCM-001, which is a US 1960s olive drab, which is going to be for the Bulldog. And I have 3 bottles of that I ordered, so we will be spraying that probably. Also have his SCA-007, which is the U.S. Air Force olive drab ANA 613, which is what the Air Force used, or the Army Air Force used, from 43 to 45. And what we're going to do is we're going to use his thinner with it. You can use, most of the other colors I have are ship colors for IJN or the U.S. Navy, especially these carrier colors, which are going to be important since I have a carrier to do. But we're not going to focus too much on the rest of those colors. Now, in terms of thinning, according to them, you can use their thinner or water or just regular IPA, isopropyl alcohol. Also, according to them, it doesn't like Tamiya's X20A or the other types of acrylic thinners like X20A, so the Vallejo airbrush thinner and those. So we'll just be sticking with their thinner for now. And we're going to be spraying this, I haven't shaken this up yet, through either our HPC Plus, or I'm going to start by spraying it through the Chrome, probably, the Badger Chrome. And I want to try with the Chrome first, and if the 0.2 in this gives us problems with the paint, we'll move over to the HPC Plus. But I don't foresee any real problems in spraying with this. And I just got the paint in today, so this will be a true first impressions starting really from nowhere with this particular paint. So let me get set up and we'll start to see what we can do. But smelling it, it smells like isopropyl. So I'll mix that in a minute, but let's smell the thinner. Same thing with the thinner. Yeah, it smells like isopropyl. Now, yeah, even on the thing it says, you can hopefully read that. Shake well before use. Thin with 50/50 IPA water. So I'm assuming, I know there's other leveling agents and other things in their thinner from what I've been told. So we'll still use their thinner, but it even says on the bottle, thin 50/50 with water IPA. So let's go ahead and give this a mix up with the Badger paint stirrer. And even after I do it with the paint stirrer, I always give it a good shake afterwards, just to make sure everything's off the bottom. As you can hear, it does have a mixing ball in it. You can tell that it's not quite mixed all the way on the bottom because that mixing ball was preventing the stirrer from getting all the way to the bottom. Now that we have everything mixed up, we'll go ahead and see how the paint is. Now again, I haven't poured any out of this. I haven't done anything other than just mix it. So we'll get a pipette. Straight out of the bottle, it looks pretty thin. So I think we're going to try and spray it neat and see how that goes first. We've got the chrome hooked up at 20 psi, and we'll see how this goes for how the paint's going to spray. I like the color. It's not quite as brown as some of the World War II colors that you get, which is good because the U.S. kind of changed the color for Vietnam or after World War II, and that's what we're going to be looking at for the Bulldog. But I mean, it looks pretty good. It looks pretty thin, so we'll go ahead and try and spray this neat and see how it goes. Like we do before, pull it through. No whistling. By the way, when you're airbrushing, if your airbrush kind of whistles, it usually means your pressure's too low or your paint too thick. So start with coverage. And the compressor's going. But neat, it sprays just fine. I can't see any issues with it. The only surface texture that we're getting is what was already there from the primer that's been sitting on this for a long time. So neat, it sprays pretty good. We'll try and do a little bit of modeling or camo work and see how it sprays. And then I have a feeling that I'll probably need to thin the paint for better camo work and fine control, modeling and things like that, but we'll see how it goes. So let's see. As you can see, for camouflage and modeling, it seems to be doing okay. I haven't adjusted my pressure from 20, so that's one of the reasons you're getting some weird spotting there. But in terms of fuzz around the spray pattern, it's not too bad. Again, remember, this is spraying it neat. So in a second we'll thin it and we'll see how it does thinned. But so far, neat, it's doing pretty good. So let's go ahead and thin this. We'll go ahead and thin it. Not quite 50-50, because I don't think we're going to need 50-50. That's probably 30% thinner. I don't have any cheap brushes sitting out to mix this with, but we'll use the pipette. That looks pretty good. Go ahead and get rid of what's in the airbrush. Load up the airbrush some more. Paint the brush, pull it through. Try some fine line work. Try some getting a little bit of tip dry, not a lot. Not as much as I would expect with an acrylic. So let's get it off with a Q-tip. Pull some paint through, and as you can tell, the fine line work with the thinner, at only 30%, is actually really nice. I am actually surprised. I usually spray lacquers, and I'm kind of close to the mic, so sorry if I got really loud, but I mean, that looks pretty good. No fuzzy haze. No real spider. Okay, that light doesn't help. No real spidering issues. That's only thinning at 30%, and even the paint that we thinned for and did coverage with, the coverage test with, was a nicer spraying experience than neat. Now, one thing that I'm going to test right now. Okay, so that did leave a fingerprint, and I can tell it feels it feels mostly dry, but it's sort of a weird, slick texture where it actually didn't really leave a fingerprint. I'm not going to touch this yet because it just sprayed it. So now that we have these variations, we'll try covering it with thin coats to see what sort of modulation or black basing or variance we can get through those layers to show through. And we're going to keep the same paint, same thinning mixture. We will go ahead and back flush this a little to help the paint mix back with itself. I know guys are probably going, he did it with a Q-tip. Oh yeah, the needle's going to be damaged. No, it won't. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. I think. So, again, pull it through. And let's see what we can get in terms of it's going to be hard to see on camera. Just dry it off with air. And of course the compressor's going, but you can kind of see on the camera that some of those lines and things that we did before are showing through. And I think if you thinned it more, it'd be easier to get that variance and the variation in. So that's what we're going to do with this side. I'll go ahead and sort of do like I was black basing, do a marble coat, thin the paint more, come back and do some blend layers. So we're going to need more paint in the brush. I'm also surprised at how well the paint is staying in this little cup we mixed it in. Yeah, you can see it's kind of separating, but it's not bad. Other acrylics I've used do the same thing. And I mean, it mixes fine, and it's not, I mean, everything in here is still wet. Nothing's really dried yet, which is nice. So we got the thinning paint in the airbrush. I'll go ahead when I add more paint to it, I'll make sure I'll mix it in a cup so the consistency is all the same. Again, pull it through, and now we'll try not to touch this side and sort of do a marble coat all over this side. So as you can, hopefully as you can see, we have a good marble layer down. Now, admittedly, olive drabs or dark colors aren't good for showing modulation, or not modulation, excuse me, marbling and black basing. So we may try it with a red or a lighter color to see how that goes. But since I want to use this as a mule to test weathering and thing, I see where an area where I missed there on the other side. So sorry, I wanted to make sure this had good coverage for when we go to weather this. And I didn't do any up here because I have a different plan for this. I'm going to actually put some hairspray down on this and do some hairspray chipping on this to see how it hairspray chips, since we're going to do that on the Bulldog. So you have the marbling layer here, and what we're going to do is take the paint that's already in the brush and add more thinner to it. Not a whole lot of thinner, but thin it down a bit more because we want this to be a very, very, very thin, almost like a filter. Well, not that thin, but we want it a lot thinner so we can slowly build up, slowly build up the value of the paint and the opacity. We want a good thin paint. This also is something that is more difficult with acrylics, because generally speaking with acrylics, the more you thin them, the more the paint quality sort of degrades, which is one of the benefits of lacquers. That doesn't happen with a lacquer. You can thin, you know, Mr. Color, MRP is already pretty thin, but you can thin the lacquer paints down to like 90% thinner, and you still have a very good quality of paint. With a lot of acrylics, you do that, and the paint degrades to the point that you can't really use it. So this is probably 60% thinner now, or maybe 70% thinner, not being scientific at all. So let's see how it sprays and see if we can build up some nice opacity. And let's build paint. And that, children, is why you use a color cup lid. I didn't. And I spilled paint. So hopefully you can see that the whole thing is mostly green now. We still have some of that color showing through. I'm going to go ahead and hit this with a hair dryer to dry it some and see what it looks like after that. Okay, as you can see, color buildup isn't all the way there yet. You can tell the color on this side is still kind of muddy. On that side it's a nice olive drab. So a few more, maybe one or two more layers, and we'll see if we can get a good color without losing the variation. I am noticing a bit of tip dry that's being problematic. So what we're going to do is just get some thinner. Now this isn't something that's really a detriment to the paint. This is something I would expect with any acrylic. So just get in there with a Q-tip that's wet with thinner. can see the colors starting to be there. It's about the same on both sides. And let's see. Yeah, we still have some of the variation, very subtle. I don't know how well you can see that. That's better. Stupid. There we go. It finally shut up. You can tell not a whole lot's coming through in terms of the variation we put down. You have some, and for an acrylic, it's pretty good. So far I'm pleased. I am noticing one thing with the airbrush, to where it's sort of a delay. You can sort of see the trigger sort of goes forward towards. It's getting sluggish, and I can only attribute that to the paint gumming up in the airbrush, which this airbrush wasn't really that clean to begin with. So if I had a different type of alcohol or even a lacquer thinner in there, that could explain it. But it wasn't a problem when we first started, when I was doing the fine line works. I noticed it a little while ago. So that looks pretty good. We'll go ahead and lay some hairspray down and then some more color to try and get the hairspray chipping done. So let's do that right quick. For hairspray, I just use the Tresemme. It just happens to be number 4, but I get the one that's not an aerosol, so I don't have to worry about decanting it. I can just open the top. We'll grab our master airbrush for this. Hairspray, we're not going to need a lot. Whew, it's going to smell nice in my shop in a minute. Oh, I hate the smell of hairspray. You can get unscented versions, but pull it through, and we're just going to lay down a good layer, let it dry. Another layer, let it dry. I usually do 3, so that's what we're going to do here. That was 2. That was 3. We have the hairspray down, just where the black is. We're going to come back with our paint. Let that dry for a minute. In the meantime, I'm going to clear out the airbrush. So now that the paint's had some time to dry, we're going to get a cup, some water, paper towel, some brushes for the chipping. I like to get a stiff brush, and then a soft flat brush. Let's double check. Yeah, that paint's dry, and let's see this. Okay, we'll go and we'll do a scratch test on this side real quick. Yeah. It scratched at the paint, but it didn't scratch through the paint. It left a mark that you probably wouldn't be happy with, but it didn't take it off to primer. So we'll start with this brush. We'll just wet an area that we want to chip. Let it activate that hairspray. Let's see what we can get happening. Okay, that's chipping there. Clean the brush. I'll switch to the softer one. And I'll just work down, work in little circles. It's taking a long time to move. Get other tools. Like a toothpick, start a scratch. Scrape over the scratch. Go ahead and get the front part wet. And this is the area. I didn't have as much hairspray back here. I had more from here up. So go back to our stiffer flat brush. The glue broke on that panel. Let's see if we can get nice little things happening here. Want that panel chipped more. You can see the more water you put on, the more hairspray gets activated, the bigger chips you're going to get. good enough for now. We'll take just tissue and blot it dry. That's the chipping we were able to get. Now I wasn't too concerned with the big chips, and you could tell I was scrubbing harder than you need to, but and there's lint from that tissue on it, but there's nice small chips in places, wear around panels. So it hairspray chips the way I would expect an acrylic to. And that's with 3 layers of hairspray as well. If you had just done 2, it would have been a little bit harder. But a hairspray chip's pretty good. I'm going to blow off this lint real quick. One thing you'll notice is where I had water pooling, I had some tide marks that showed up. So what we'll do is we'll just brush over everything again. And dry it. And I got rid of the tide marks. So I'm happy with that hairspray chipping. It did not chip off as easily as Vallejo does. It, to me, chipped off about the same way that Tamiya thinned with their acrylic thinner chips. I also put 3 layers of hairspray, which is kind of quite a bit. But as you can tell, had some nice small chips in that. So what we're going to do, once this sits for a while and I can clean up everything, we'll try all of our weathering effects on both sides. The only difference is this side will not get a clear coat. This side will get a clear coat. So this side will get some X22 gloss thinned with MLT, and we'll put that on, spray it as a protective layer to make sure nothing happens, then we'll go over decaling and everything else. This side will do the same step on both sides, only this side will not have a clear coat on it because I want to see how it does without a clear coat, because I generally do not spray a clear coat unless I have to. So that's part 1 of the scale colors acrylic paint testing. Hopefully the new part will be out soon, and hopefully this won't be super long of a series. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one.